Welcome, Gabriela, Anna, Teresa, to using our voices. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk about growing up bilingual. Al principio, quiero decir que lo siento que no hablo español suficiente para tener una conversación en español. So I want to apologize to begin with that my Spanish is not good enough to have a conversation in Spanish with you, but at any point in which you would like to have a situation in which you would like to speak Spanish, we'd welcome that.
Okay. Your Spanish was really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to give a little bit of background to our conversation, and that is that your mother, Marianela Lyons, we had a conversation, and part of that conversation was about her desire and success in having her daughters grow up bilingual. And at one point when we were talking, I don't know, I might have asked something about how her daughters felt, and your mother said, "Well, I don't know. You'd probably have to ask my daughter."
Now it will be interesting to interview them to perceive how they really remember, know that feeling.
So hence, you have kindly, very kindly offered to talk with me about growing up bilingual. Why don't we start by just tell me a little bit about yourself. If you could introduce yourself and then tell me a little bit about yourself.
My name is Gaby Lyons. I was born in Panama City, Panama, but I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I currently live in Durham, North Carolina, and I've been here for the last 5 years, roughly. I moved down here to do a speech pathology or communication sciences and disorders program. And I'm currently a speech pathologist in the public schools. And my whole life, I've really been passionate about language learning and bilingualism. And prior to becoming a speech pathologist, I was a high school Spanish and French teacher. And I learned French as an adult, so and lived in France for a bit. And anyways, all of that, I've like my whole working life has been connected to languages somehow. So yeah, it's a big part of my life and I love talking about it.
Right, great. Thank you, Gabby.
Mhm.
Who wants to go next?
I can go next. My name is Anna Lyons. I grew up speaking Spanish and English. I was born here in Buffalo, New York. It's interesting that my mom says she doesn't know how we felt about learning Spanish because I can say that as a teenager, I hated it. Um, and then I realized how important it was. And it led me, I think, in a way to eventually learn Portuguese. I did my bachelor's in Spanish at Buff State, and I ended up going abroad to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil for a year, and there I learned Brazilian Portuguese. And I think the same way as it is for Gabby, it's been the same for me. Languages have always been a part of my life, even more so now that I work as an ENL teacher at Amherst High School. I work with kids that speak many different languages, and many of those languages are languages that I myself don't speak. So I'd like to at least learn Arabic, which is the most spoken language. I have a huge passion for languages. I love learning about different languages, learning words and new languages. And I would say it's a passion of mine. So I definitely nerd out on linguistics and anything language.
Thank you, Anna. Teresa.
My name is Teresa Lyons. Yeah, I was born here in Buffalo and grew up in Buffalo. I would say the same thing. I kind of rebelled against my mom, like in terms of her trying to teach me Spanish. I really hated it. But as I've grown up, I've really come to love it. I don't know. There was a point where I didn't know whether or not to be a Spanish teacher or an art teacher, and I was about to go on that pathway to becoming a Spanish teacher, but then my love for art kind of overpowered it a little bit, and so now I'm gonna become an art teacher. I'm at Buff State, and I really love it. But Spanish and I think potentially Portuguese in the future will always be there as like my second favorite thing, like ever, my hobby, or So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. I think it's funny to hear from you that you might have resented a little bit having Spanish, your mother really being dedicated, let's put it that way, to you using and learning Spanish when you were younger, because I am just incredibly envious of anyone who is bilingual, trilingual. As an ESL teacher, I had students who were multilingual, and I'm just extremely envious of people who are able to learn a language at an early age, because that's when you really have a secure hold on the language and also on the accent. So I'm terribly, terribly envious of each of you. So we'll just start out with that. And then maybe you can tell us a little bit about your home language environment as you were growing up.
I think for me, it's interesting hearing my sisters talk about their responses to speaking Spanish when growing up, because I feel like my experience was very different. I always loved speaking Spanish. Definitely, like when I was growing up, like I like to be in school and have my mom come in and have to talk to her in Spanish, because everybody would be like, "Oh, that's so cool." I think maybe a big difference is the fact that like my first few years, I know my mom and I were going back to Panama often and spending long, like a few months at a time there. So I was like spent a lot of time with my mom's family, and I think that really had a really big impact on how I viewed Spanish and like how important it was, because I had these really strong connections with like my cousins and my aunts and uncles and my grandparents. But when I was at home, like when we were in Buffalo, my parents did one parent, one language in the home. So we always spoke English with my dad and then Spanish with my mom. And even when we would speak in English to my mom, she would say like, "Oh, I don't understand. You need to say it in Spanish." And she would always have us reading in Spanish, writing in Spanish. And she was a big stickler on like grammar and vocabulary. And I remember feeling frustrated and annoyed, but like now, like I use Spanish all the time professionally and like have to write to parents or write stuff about, like when I'm doing evaluations and stuff in Spanish. And I'm so grateful that I have that foundation, to be able to speak the way I do. I think the only issue is that like when it comes to our Spanish, and my sisters and I have talked about this before, but our Spanish, um, is somewhat, I think, formal and sometimes kind of dated, because we speak the way our mom spoke to us. So sometimes when we're talking, like our cousins will like tease us, like, "Why did you say that like that?" Or like it's so like your Spanish is so like stuffy. And I'm like, I know, but I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, it happened to me one time in Argentina, that I met one of my friends and I used the usted like formal you for him, and he was like, "Why are you like calling me like the formal you? Like we're the same age." And it just like came out because we were just taught to be very formal, like uh and I know it's supposed to be like someone older than you, but that's just like what's in my mind is always, no matter what, you normally use it with people you don't know too. But it's just been stuck in my mind. Like it's just very, very formal professional Spanish, which I think is good for our professional lives. Like I'd rather speak that Spanish than informal Spanish, but it's hard for like our everyday social lives, like interacting with people our age. And so for me, I've always wanted to spend some time in Panama, like I don't know, longer than the 2 months that we normally would spend there, like in the summer or so. But my experience obviously was the same, the one parent, one language, growing up. And it's always weird to switch the languages with our parents. Like it's always, if our mom was mad at us, then it might be switched to English. Or like if our dad was messing with us, he might speak Spanish with us, but we did not like that. We still don't.
Yeah, it's really odd to talk to my mom in Spanish and then or in English and then my dad in Spanish. It feels so off.
That is so funny. I've heard you say that before, and I guess I could understand how that might how that might happen, that you are really do become accustomed. Even when I have tried to a little bit speak Spanish to say a child, just trying to connect and speak to a child in Spanish, they just look at me like, are you from Mars? What are you doing here? You don't speak this language. And I'm like, okay.
See, that's really funny because I think like I've noticed in my work, like I also work in a private practice and I see a lot of Spanish speaking kids and their families in that practice. And there are other therapists that are Spanish speaking, but in my experience, there's been a few kids that have not progressed much with the therapists that learn Spanish later and might have like a more pronounced accent and stuff. But when they're speaking with me, like I feel like the kids have like opened up a lot more, and the parents are like, yeah, their response to you has been a lot, like it seems like they're much more comfortable and like it seems like it makes sense to them. Because again, like when the other therapists are talking to them, sometimes I look at the kid and like their face has been like, what's happening? So it's just really funny you should say that.
Yeah, yeah. Today, so you were the third one to come along, and I wondered if that affected your learning of language too, because by the time you came along, there were two sisters, and I don't know if you, the three of you, ever speak what language you speak together. I'm curious, actually.
When we're talking badly about something in a situation or an area, we usually tend to switch to Spanish, but Spanish is so universal nowadays that, or like it is, that I guess we're very careful when we do that, but that's like the only instance that I can like recall that we use. Like,
We've tried. We tried for a little bit, maybe like a few months back, to only speak in Spanish with each other.
yeah.
And it just felt weird. It was like same like trying to speak Spanish with our dad or English with our mom. Like it's just something that I wish we would have done since we were little, like just speak Spanish with each other. But it was something, as a kid, you're just gonna do what's like comfortable for you. And now it's just like solidified or like fossilized, like we just speak English with each other. It even got to a point where like Gabby and I admitted to each other that we were speaking to each other less, like calling each other less or texting each
Oh.
other less because we would have to speak in Spanish.
Well, that's not good at all.
Yeah.
It
It's
almost
just like things wouldn't like translate over. It just felt like awkward or um I I don't know, like jokes or like just like our own like little like phrases that we have with each other, they're in English.
Yeah, it almost feels like pretentious in a way to speak Spanish with them. I don't know why, but it just is the feeling that comes out of it.
It
Right.
almost feels more natural to speak Portuguese with each other. And Teresa understands a bit, but it's because it's like a third language. And I feel like if I spoke French, maybe it would be the same too. Like it wouldn't feel so weird. But Spanish, I don't know, it feels weird to speak Spanish with each other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gabby, you talked a little bit about in your career as a speech pathologist that you're able to make that connection with children because of your language. What are some of the joys of being bilingual?
Um, I love that moment when I'm talking to someone and like if they're talking in English and like you can see that they're having a hard time or they're not able to say exactly what they want to say, and then like I'll ask like habla español, and like to see like their face like light up and then be like, oh my God, yes, and then be able to say like everything they want to say, and then it's just like so much easier and faster, and then you have like that immediate connection. It's like it's great. Like I really, really enjoyed that aspect, and um just having like access to a whole other world. Like something that has really stuck with me is like my dad has said like that one of the ways that he's experienced magic in his life was learning another language. And like I do feel like being multilingual is so magical because like yeah, you can like watch stuff with subtitles or you could look up song lyrics like in English, but like you like unless you speak it, you'll never like fully feel like those words. Like it won't have the same weight. And then I think like having grown up with this and this being like our like it's also our culture, like because I know that I don't connect in French or in Portuguese to things, like I don't have that like really strong emotional connection to stuff the way I do like with Spanish. Like sometimes I hear music in Spanish or like I'll hear poems or watch a movie and it like resonates with me so much in a way that like yeah, I can connect with stuff, but it's just not at the same level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is truly magical. I felt like when I moved to Brazil, I didn't speak Portuguese when I got there. And I always think of this like metaphor, like I couldn't understand anything. Just going to the grocery store was confusing for me too. And I thought it would be so much easier because the proximity to Spanish. And it felt like I had like water in my ears. Like I just couldn't properly understand people. And after about a month, it was as if like I was taking intensive Portuguese courses. It was as if the water like drained out of my ears and I could suddenly understand everything. It was a really cool process.
You talked about biculturalism being part of bilingualism, and I think that that's very true. Teresa, I know that I worked with you on a project when you were in high school, and I think when I was working with you, I recognized that magic that Gabby and Anna have talked about, because part of what you were able to do in this project was because you were bilingual. You had that magic quality, and I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, I was able to like, I guess, well, part of my project, I had to interview like an asylum seeker or like a woman who went through the process of crossing the border. And I remember I struggled at first a bit because I usually only speak Spanish with my mom, and I get really shy when I speak in Spanish. But then I was able to like break that wall at like as I was like interviewing her, and it just I feel like when you speak like I don't know, when you speak their native tongue, it's just a lot more, it feels more natural, and you're able to like connect in a deeper level, like how Gabby said it. So I don't know. Yeah.
Did you recognize the benefits of being bilingual when you were young? That's one of the things that I talked about with your mother. Did you actually recognize those benefits? And Anna and Teresa, you kind of hinted at maybe not always.
I don't know. Do remember just hating reading, like all the readings my mom would put me to, do, or like the essays. She even made my one best friend at the time write an essay in Spanish too. That's how committed she was. And my best friend did not know, she doesn't speak Spanish, so it was really difficult. But yeah, my mom, I guess there's just moments like that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it took me a while. I felt like maybe before I was a teenager, I didn't mind speaking Spanish. Like I liked it. It felt like something cool too that like, you know, most if not all my classmates didn't speak a second language. And then when I became a teenager, I became like more like self-conscious, not just like of the language, but like of the food that I would bring to school and things like that. And I just not that I tried to like not speak it. I always spoke Spanish to my mom, but it felt like something not as important. I remember like just thinking as a teenager, like this isn't important. Like I didn't have the foresight to see how much it would really end up meaning and the role that it would play in my life. Um, like now, I only have one Spanish speaking student, but I'm able to communicate with his mom. Like when I had a meeting with his mom, I didn't have to get an interpreter. Like I could just communicate directly with mom, and that was just amazing to be able to do that. Looking back, I'm so grateful, as Gabby said, that my mom was so persistent, um, because I work as an interpreter too outside of teaching. I do interpreting and translating. And I met another interpreter the other day for Arabic, and she said she's been here for about 25 years, like same as my mom, married a guy from here and has two kids. And I said, "Oh, do they speak Arabic?" And she said, "No, because my son was having speech delays when he was a kid, so I just decided not to." And I was like thinking in my head, like, oh, that stinks. Like that stinks for him. Like I believe like I had speech delays, like we all did. We all had some form of it, if I'm not mistaken. Where like people were telling my mom, like, oh, stop speaking in Spanish to them, because it's gonna slow them down. And I'm so glad she didn't listen to them.
Yeah, I like when I was having a lot of issues in school, like in primary school. I remember they didn't know what I had. Yeah, I had a lot. They thought that I had I don't know. They before they found out that I had ADHD, they were like, "Oh, she like has a learning disability, but we don't know what it is." But I think the cause of it is because she also knows Spanish, so that's in the way. And my mom always fought that, that mindset that they were, trying to plant in her head. And she was like, "No, I don't believe that's the issue. I think there's something else. Why are you blaming it on the language, basically?" But yeah, it's crazy how people think that kind of interferes, I guess. So
Yeah, because as an ESL teacher, I'm well aware that the research doesn't show that at all.
yeah.
I know that all of you are aware of that too, and I always think it's a shame, but it does take, also as an ESL teacher, I'm well aware that it takes a tremendous effort to keep children using the home language because just like the three of you said that you speak English to each other in the home, it takes a real concerted effort to have children retain that language. So yeah, and it's good that you have it and you recognize it now, I don't know if you have thought about, we talked about biculturalism in addition to bilingualism. Is there any way that you have thought at any point, or at what point you might have thought about how the Spanish and the bilingualism has also affected your feelings about your cultural background and your sense of identity?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, kids that grow up between two cultures or from a culture but live in the United States and don't speak one of the parents' home language or the parents' home language, like how disconnected they feel. And like uh I've seen like many instances, many stories of kids that are trying to learn the home language, and they're made fun of for it, or when they go back they just feel not part of the culture. So yeah, I think about that all the time, how amazing it is and was that we could always communicate with our grandparents and the rest of the family and always feel connected to our culture through the language. Um, I'm sure, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a term that they use for kids like in that are from Latin American cultures but don't speak Spanish. They're called no sabo kids. That like it's like the wrong conjugation of like to not know, and it's so sad. Like it's something that, kind of like as a mean, heartless teenager, I was like, oh, well, I know Spanish. Like, haha, like I have a one up. And now like I look back on that and I'm like, that's actually so sad. Like I feel so bad. It wasn't their fault. It's not their fault that they don't know their language. And I'm really so lucky that my mom was so, so persistent.